I'm more than excited about this interview, like beyond excited. Um, for the audience listening, Doug and I were just chit-chatting before this, and I was just telling him that I feel like um, I'm going to end up just kind of naturally exposing parts of myself that I don't normally feel comfortable talking about because I'm just not around like-minded people. And Doug, you are just so on my page. I love your story. I mean, going all the way back to your childhood up into what you're doing now and the work. And I mean, your website is just stunning. I could look at it all day long. There's a lot of artists in my family. I paint and draw. My brother does as well. And it's your work is incredible. Not only is it beautiful to look at, but the meaning behind it is just, it's beyond words. It really is. It's incredible. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's,
Thank you for having me.
yes, it truly is an honor. Um, if you're okay with it, I would love to speak to you. If we could just start with kind of your childhood, because something that I find fascinating and something that I resonate with so much is kind of the struggles that you had in school, just how you were a quieter child and you found yourself daydreaming, and that has led to kind of all of this. So if you don't mind going back a little bit and just telling us about just a little bit of your childhood, your upbringing, maybe your family, or I mean whatever from there you wanna talk about. But if we could start.
Sure, sure. As long as your audience doesn't click off going, "Oh my God, a childhood. I have to hear this whole childhood story."
We don't have to stick it. Yeah, we don't need to spend a ton of
Oh,
time on it, but
it won't be.
there are some pieces about it that I
Well,
really resonate with.
it's funny that certain setbacks in your own view of what setbacks would be could end up being a positive
Yes.
aspect and element of your life. I had a real problem with reading, and I didn't know what it was because I was a young kid in grammar school. So I'm born in the early 1950s, back with the Brontosaurus. And nobody diagnosed dyslexia back then, so I'm like, and I went to a Catholic grammar school, and they put the heat on me about, and they were great, but they put the heat on me about falling behind in class and this and that. I'm like, I don't know why everyone else is getting this, but I'm not. Like, I just can't concentrate. I don't read well. And then there was one other kid I remember that didn't read well either, and the nuns embarrassed him in front of the classroom.
Mm.
And it's one of the things I remember the best about my grammar school, because I made the connection of, he's a loser and I must be a loser too, because I can't do the same thing. And so now what happens is you start to turn away from the very thing that you need help with.
Mm.
I started to turn away from reading because I don't want to do that, because I don't want to fail and I don't want to be embarrassed. So I knew I had memorization and dyslexia problems. I knew that I just couldn't follow along in reading. And it's even to this day with my music composition and my music reading, it has held me up. I know the notes, I know the theory, I can write music, but if you ask me to read music and I start to look at it and then look down and look back up again, I don't know where I am.
Mm-hmm.
I can never find my way back.
Yes.
So I've taken in regular reading to audiobooks, audible.com, and I've learned a lot by listening to Audible and audiobooks, which doubles also as a really good thing when you're driving a car, because you can't be reading a
Yes.
book.
Yes.
And so it's really good. So I struggled with reading, and my mind wandered. And I always say, as a sky watcher, later on, it turns out that everything I went to school for, I don't do. It's like,
Right. Yes. You and me both.
yeah, it's just some sort of boot camp that you have to go through,
Mm-hmm.
and including my marriage, not to, but
Yep.
anyway, it's like a passage of time and a rite of passage. And so what I was interested in as a kid was turtles, frogs, snakes, going to the golf course, catching little animals, bringing them home, driving my mother crazy with another snake coming out from under the door. And my mother had to run out the house and get a neighbor. I had to catch one behind the washing machine, one thing after the other, you know? So I was a nature kid. I loved nature. I loved fishing. I loved like anything outdoors, catching bees and putting them in bottles and everything
Mm.
like that. And as I got through school, um, towards the latter part, and like towards my teens, everything to me was outer space. Everything was wondering about the universe. Everything was Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, anything I could get my hands on that had something to do with thinking about life somewhere else and like, what are we doing here? And we just, this can't be it. Don't tell me
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
And now this is on the backdrop of my mom and dad with a Roman Catholic,
Mm.
you know, upbringing, and we were going to the priests and we were going to the church, and when we were hearing the priests said certain things to us, and when our hair got long, my brother Greg, my dear brother Greg, was a year or two older than me. He and I looked at each other and we were like, but we were wise guys. We were like, but Father, Jesus had long hair. That didn't sit well. So we had a lot of that going on. Anyway, coming up through there, it became something where I was just fascinated with nature, science, mechanics. I went, instead of going to a regular Catholic high school, I went to Bergen Technical High School for auto mechanics. And that was one of the key things. Now, my dad was a car dealer. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'll learn the car business and I'll fix cars, and eventually I'll be part of the dealership and maybe own the dealership someday. So that I went in that direction. And that was much more suited to me because I'm very logical, hands-on, take it apart, put it back up together person. And I did that for my mom as a kid all through my early days. Douglas, fix this. This is broken. The iron doesn't work. The phone broke. And I would take things apart and fix them. So that was my calling. And my mechanics and logic had me naturally get into auto mechanics. And I built mini bikes and go-karts. And it was a great time in the country because, I mean,
Mm.
talking about the late 50s, early 60s was like an amazing time in America.
Yes.
And so I started to fix things and build cars and rebuild engines and stuff till my brother Greg, and I'll mention him many times. My brother Greg, who was older, he said, when I was in Bergen Technical High School, he said, Doug, get ready on Friday, bring a change of clothes because I'm going to take you to see a concert. And I'm like, a concert? Like, what are we doing? He goes, we're going to drive to Philadelphia and we're going to see a band called The Doors play. And I said,
Love it.
really? The Doors? Okay, whoever they are. And that sounds good. And we did, and we went, and it was one of the deflectors. I often look at life like a river flowing and stones are here and there and the water gets deflected that way and then this way, and this is our path. And that was one of the deflectors to change my life, because when that happened, I said, wait a minute, that's so cool. And I love Ray, the guy who's playing keyboard. My brother Greg was like a Jim Morrison fan. And I said, I'm going to go out and buy an organ, So I went out and bought a Farfisa organ.
Wow.
It's great when you don't know what you can or cannot do. It's great.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
when you're like happy go lucky, oh, I'll buy one and I'll learn it in a week and we'll have a band, and I never played an instrument before, so I got it. And then as I'm going to school, my one of my buddies in my auto mechanics class, Bob, he was a drummer, and oddly enough, one of his jobs was moving pianos. So he moved pianos. I rebuilt a piano because then I took my auto mechanics and merged it into piano tuning and
Awesome.
piano rebuilding. And now I'm a piano technician and a piano tuner. And we rebuilt our own little baby grand piano, and we took electric pickups and we put it on the soundboard. And we figured this all ourselves, and we jacked all the right kinds of stuff into it. And we started a band, and we eventually played in New York City. We played in the famous CBGBs. We played in the club in the
Awesome.
CBGBs and Trudy Howers and this and that, right around the time of Blondie and the Talking Heads and bands like that coming through there.
Oh,
And so now I'm a musician. So I went from auto mechanics nature and auto mechanics. Then you add on to that music, learning the keyboards. And I studied classical music for a while with a Juilliard graduate, and picked up everything I could along the way.
Mm.
And somewhere along the line, as the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits and all these shows that I was watching were getting into me, and I have to say something for the Twilight Zone and Rod Serling, is that there can't be a better education in morality
Mm.
and understanding of life,
Mm.
karma, fairness,
Mm.
open-mindedness. Everything about the Twilight Zone was my education.
I
It
love
was just great. My mom and dad were wonderful people, but my father was like the guy behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz.
it.
On Sunday,
Hmm.
it's like, don't he's in his chair with his New York Times, and the dog would sit next to him, and don't bother your father.
Right. Yes. Yes.
They were, and at the time, I thought my dad was the biggest ball breaking conservative in the world.
Mm.
And as I look back at him, he was a liberal person.
Mm.
It,
Interesting.
because we're so way off kilter about what these terms are today,
Yes. Yep.
that like the liberal hippie that I was back then is seen as a raging conservative today.
Right.
It's so crazy that nothing makes sense, but not to get into politics. Um, so, but my father was very like, he never stopped me from doing anything. And I'd be like, Dad, you know what? I want to work on engines. Could you bring a car engine home for me? Car engine. So he got his service manager to get a tow truck, and they brought a big it was a very special engine, a 392 Hemi engine. They dropped it on my driveway, oil and all, for me to work
Wow.
on and fix and this and that. So all these things I'm bringing along, and I was bringing up earlier about Twilight Zone. I'll jump off of topics too often. So
You're good.
um, that Twilight Zone taught me so much about just, yeah, that's not fair, that's not right. Rod Serling brought up old age. He brought up everything, and he showed you the journey of life, the parody of things and everything.
Mm.
But he also showed me the wonder of the universe. And somewhere along the line, I started to stare at the sky, and I started to, as I got older, I started to get involved with the ufology world, especially when the computer was out and
Mm.
the internet. And I followed it all along. And like my brother Greg, we had a UFO sighting when I was a young kid, but it was vague, and I don't remember him much. My brother Greg does. But at some point, I started to meet all these people online. I started to read and study and look and connect the dots. And then I heard about somebody named Chris Bledsoe, who saw an amazing UFO story down in the Cape Fear River. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I gotta find this person. And I did. I asked Mel Fabregas of Veritas Radio. He had Chris on, and I called Mel and I said, could you forward my email to Chris Bledsoe? And he did. And
Wow.
Chris wrote me, and I wrote him, and we became friends immediately. And their family, sight unseen, I didn't know if I was a hitman or not. I mean, that they invited me to their home, and I stayed over their home 2 or 3, 4 days in a row. Chris took me to the Cape Fear River, showed me the sighting area. I photographed everything. I met his son, Chris Jr., who told me the whole story. And this is where the UFO thing merged with all the rest of my skills.
Mm.
Oh, I forgot to mention. Also, at about 17 years old, my brother Greg, again, third time I mention him, he started to paint. And he then took me to the Salvador Dalí Museum in Cleveland, Ohio.
Yes.
And I have one of my Dalí shirts on right here. And I had another, oh my God, that is so cool, I'm gonna paint type of moment. Like I could do this, like not knowing, you just go for it.
Yes.
And I wouldn't do any of this today because I'd be convinced you can't, there's no way you're going to be able to
Right.
do it.
Mm.
So it's a naivete. And And I was so impressed with Dalí's paintings that I began to paint too. And I'll never forget I think my first painting was um, I painted a copy of Simon and Garfunkel's earliest album cover.
Awesome.
And I did it. And I remember coming upstairs and go, is this any good? My mom and dad were like, who did that? That's
You buy
crazy.
that.
I'm like, I did, you know. And
Wow.
again, my brother wasn't too happy about that. He's like, oh my. So, so now, okay. Grammar school into daydreaming, sky watching, turtles, frogs, snakes, nature, mechanics, fixing things, logic, piano tuning is all like gelling into like sci-fi and like wondering about the universe and on, and adding music from the Doors influence and adding
Mm,
art from Salvador Dali's influence. That's what kind of that was my education, not college. I went to 1 year of Ramapo College and I quit in the first year. And I'm like, this is a waste of time. This is not.
mm,
And with my reading background troubles, I knew it wasn't for me.
yeah.
And so why don't we leave it at that for now? And you can talk to me about some other things.
I love that. I love that. I mean, going just through all of it, my back, when you look at my work experience, my hobbies and all of that, it's so all over the place. And everything you're saying, from the daydreaming and, just looking up at the sky and just knowing that there was something bigger, and animals, nature, I mean, just all of it. And it's very much the same way for me, where what felt like one little thing in the moment just led to another and another and another. And it's hard for me to talk about so much of what I've experienced and have been through. One, it's hard for me to find the words for it, but I also, like, if someone's had an NDE, they can so easily say, I've had this NDE, and label it as that and then explain the story. And for me, it's just like a million little things that have added up over time.
Yeah.
And I just you what you're talking about has just it resonates with me so much. And um I do want to get into where you like I would love to talk about Mexico, or really, and you've had so many different experiences filming and seeing things. Um and I think it's so important to talk about, because something that I find fascinating is um how you switched cameras and you ended up using infrared. And I think something that is happening way more often than we realize is things are around us and above us, and our naked eye can't see it.
Mhm.
And even just how, like, you went from one camera to the next, like these internal knowings that you've had
Mm.
is exactly how I would describe what I've experienced. So if you could talk about that, like where in your life you kind of just were like, we're going to switch cameras, and then, what you caught from there.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It's an intuition. It's a
Yes.
way, it's an intuitive way of knowing where you can't really tell somebody I can prove that, but I know. I know
Yes.
that I know. And
Yes.
I wouldn't be like, no, I'm so positive that I'll bet $1,000 on it. I'm just saying I know that that's real. And I remember watching The Outer Limits.
Mhm.
One of their first episodes was called The Galaxy Being, which is so great. The original Outer Limits, and it was Robert Culp had made this communication on the screen with this being. It was like, it was all fuzzy and this and that, and somehow it was they were at a radio station and they turned up the power. And they turned up the power so high that the being got pulled through the
Mhm.
screen and into the room. And I was like, yeah, this is like an energy being. It's not like a solid thing,
Right.
and it's a frequency. Now,
Yes.
now we're talking about in the 60s. I was listening to stuff like that. So
Wow.
it's I think that a lot, it will be hard for me to really explain what one particular thing was that made me think this or that, but it's a conglomeration of little instincts and intuitions and experiences, also nightmares, also dreams. I had one out of body experience once where I left the room and went to the ceiling, and I was on the ceiling, and I remember looking down. My girlfriend and I were together on bed on an afternoon, and I remember looking down and going, what are you doing
Wow.
up there? I don't think it lasted more than 12 or 15 seconds at the most, but it was long enough, and then I was back in my body. All I had to do is have one incident like that, which makes me know that it's possible.
Yes.
And then, you study the Monroe Institute and
Yes.
all the work that Robert Monroe did. I read the book read by audible.com, Journeys Out of the Body, and
Mhm.
fascinated with all of that and everything. So let's jump back over to the UFO thing. I started um I remember getting a hold of a night vision camera. Night vision is my favorite thing. And I'd be able to like get a scope and like see into the night sky in a way that the eyes couldn't see.
Mm.
And it picked up either a heat signature or something that was different. And I remember even walking in my town of Hoboken. I was walking in my town and I had it, I was experimenting with it. And I looked above me and I saw the stars and everything. But then I looked above me and there was a glowing white thing just moving past me over me that was not there with my eyes. It was only there with that. And I'm like, okay, what is that? Not making any sound. There's no, there's no audible anything. It's not a plane or a helicopter. It was silent, but it moved over. And all you needed was a few incidents to start to say, this is worth putting my time into it. So I'd call it sky fishing, and I love sky fishing. It's
I
like
love that term.
cast out. And so I brought a night vision camera to a place in Mexico that my buddy John and I owned. We still own it in Playa del Carmen, beautiful place.
Mm.
I would go up on the rooftop with a tripod and the whole thing, and I would lay there and I would spot objects. And I spotted it again. I spotted an object looking straight up, and I put some of these stories in the Beings book. You're aware of the Beings book,
Yes,
right?
I
Yes.
sure am.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I put some of the stories of my Mexico sightings in there where I'm like, I look straight up, there's nothing, perfectly beautiful sky, starlit sky. And then I looked with the thing and I videoed this one. I videoed this big white object, the size of like the full moon, if you were looking at the moon,
Wow.
like you're just going right over me, very slow, very, very slow, moving. And I'm like, it's not there with my eyes. So what is it?
Mm.
And I did show one of my ABC friends, shall I say. I showed one of my intelligence friends that, and he was perplexed. He's very, very experienced. And he's like, I don't know. He thought, is it possible that drug runners were using a hot air balloon and like moving drugs over the, I'm like, hey, it's Mexico, it's possible, but I didn't think so. But
Right, right. The
so
places our logical minds, go
yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah,
we
yeah.
need to say to make it
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, he's
Makes
interested,
sense.
right? He's interested in catching drug dealers. I'm interested in
Yeah.
science, other beings. Anyway, when you touched on the infrared, I learned that from somebody. Um, and so I got some sky watcher was talking about that the infrared spectrum picks up a different spectrum than us. And if you ever look at the light spectrum that a human being can see, it's a very narrow spectrum. Goes
Mm.
all the way down to, gamma to X-ray to this to that, the infrared to, microwave and everything. And it's a long spectrum. And we live in the little slice in the middle of it. That's it. That's
Mm.
all we're aware of. So animals, bats, different kinds of night creatures, everything are seeing and are aware of so many other things.
Yes.
So I got the camera, and I remember having a regular camera and the infrared, a Nikon infrared. I had it set up, and my regular camera. And I remember looking out and spotting an object with the infrared and seeing a white object just sitting still in the sky that the regular camera didn't see.
Mm.
Like, aha. So now I know. I've got the proof. I got something sitting there. And now again, we're talking about years ago, and think about all the advancements we've had in science and everything to this day. So but my night vision setup is really great, and I got it better and better. I have a Luna camera on a tripod with something called a Lilliput screen. It's about this big a screen jacked in, and so I can like just traverse the sky, and it will show me everything on that screen, and I can record everything. The second I see something that I know is unusual, I hit the record button, and then I can record it, and I can save them. So that's how my sky watching went.
I absolutely love that. And something you mentioned in the beings is if you could talk a little bit about the incident with the Black Hawk helicopter, because
Yeah.
that will kind of lead me into my next question for you. But in general, that is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it really was, and it's in the very place that I'm sitting was where the Black Hawk helicopter arrived over this building. It's a condominium building, solid brick building. And I had remembered that what had happened was I was coming home from ice hockey in the morning on a Sunday morning. I remember I played at a 6 a.m. game, so 6 to 8, 8:30. Somewhere I'm getting home, somewhere like 9, 9:15. And I remember before I walked in the house, I looked up to the left, up in the sky. And that's one of the key things to UFOs is you have to be looking up. If you don't look up, you're never going to see anything in the sky. And I'm trained all the time to be staring at the sky. So I
Mm.
just, and I saw a bright star in the daytime sky, and a beautiful blue sky. And I'm like, what is that? Like, what is that doing? And it was really like the size of a large star.
Wow.
And I'm looking at it, and there are a few clouds in the sky, and the clouds were moving slowly from my town over New York City.
Mhm.
So that's where I am in the country, East Coast, and New York City's across the river. Helicopter, here comes the helicopter. So I don't know if you could hear it.
Oh, how funny.
Hold on.
That's
So
a
anyway, so we have a lot of helicopters here. But anyway, I saw a friend of mine, Mike, and I said, Mike, just keep an eye on that for a second. I'm going to run upstairs and get my camera. I ran upstairs, brought the tripod down. It was like a monopole, so it wasn't like steady. It was like a single pole. And I had a Nikon camera with a zoom lens. And I leaned back and I steadied myself and click, 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 and zoomed in and zoomed out. And I still couldn't tell really what it was, but I knew it wasn't right. And it wasn't moving. As
Mhm.
the clouds were moving past, it was staying stationary. So I knew it wasn't part of whatever the wind current was.
Mhm.
And then I noticed that it moved back west this way, not fast, very slow, and then stopped. And then eventually just went over New York City and behind everything, and I lost it. But after I got all those photographs, I came in the house, loaded it up on the computer, and lo and behold, when I enlarged them, it wasn't a singular object. And I put these photos in the book, The Beings, which I'm the first chapter in that book, and I put it in there. It was a configuration of 8 or 9 kind of rounded, squared off objects that were moving in and out in different configurations.
Mhm.
Sometimes they were separated, sometimes they came together, sometimes they were in a symmetrical like T or something. And I was like, what is this? It's not a single object. And then there was one where they were all apart
Hmm.
and they were all back together again. This is not a single object. And I remember I did all the photographs, and I also called. This is one thing that's frustrating for me is I can't remember the ufologist organization that I called, but they came and they did an investigation.
Hmm.
And to this day, I never was able to find him again. And to be honest with you, I don't think I mentioned this before. I'll mention it to you. I don't really know who they were. I don't.
Interesting.
I don't trust who they were.
Huh.
It was almost like, I don't know. Well, I don't want to get too woo-woo about it, but
Interesting.
anyway, I kind of see the guy's face, but I can't remember. And I never could understand why none of my emails again were answered and I couldn't find them. But anyway, I took the photographs and I loaded them up and I sent them to key people in my life at the time, probably Chris Bledsoe. I had met Grant Cameron, who did the forward for the book, maybe Peter Robbins, Robert Morningstar, a whole bunch of like ufology people,
Hmm.
friends. I go,
Wow.
hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? Sent them out. I don't think more than 3 or 4 days later, I'm guessing, I don't quite remember. I remember, oh my God, what the heck is that? And it was the loudest helicopter I ever heard in my life. It was right over the building.
Wow.
And I don't know if it knew I was in the building or not, but it was like bum, 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 bum. And I'm like, holy crow. And I came outside and I went in the back parking lot and there it was. And I tell people I could have hit it with a rock. That's how close it was.
Wow.
Hitting over me in that backyard. And I have a little tiny Mini Cooper car I mentioned. And I got in the car, opened the garage door, electric garage door, and took off because I was going to go get coffee at a place on the end of town. And I just took off. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but. And when I got to the coffee shop and I stopped there, it was over there.
Unbelievable.
And so
So,
I'm like,
so you didn't see it following you or anything, but you saw it once you arrived there.
I didn't
Yeah.
see a phone number. So,
Unbelievable.
so this is what went on in my mind. I thought to myself, all I did was send an a group of emails. I had I had investigators come. Their conclusion after everything they did, by the way, those investigators told me that they checked Newark Airport, LaGuardia Airport, they checked Teterboro Airport, they checked Lakeville, I think it's called Lakeville, where the Hindenburg actually exploded many years ago. They Lakehurst or something like that airport. They checked satellites. They checked even the space station's location at the time. Nothing, no explanation. Newark Airport didn't know anything about it. No one knew anything about it. So they listed the sighting as an unknown. And that
Hmm.
was it. It was an unknown. A unknown, a UFO, a unidentified flying object. That's what it was. And the grand question takeaway is, how did they know it was me who sent the email?
Hmm. Huh.
And what kind of foreknowledge or surveillance is that?
Mm.
And to be able to know who I was, and I don't know. I never understood it to this day, but I do know that the our government pretty much knows everything. So
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Yes, yes. And
that was the story with that. Yeah,
I love it. I love it. And this is a perfect segue. Something I've heard you talk about in the past is, well, Jeff Mara, who I am a huge fan of.
yeah.
It's just from my own personal weird experiences and all of that. One thing led to another. And when COVID hit, um, I just had this like overwhelming feeling that what we were being told was, not what was going on. Um,
Good for you.
and and it really, that's when I had been doing a lot of research before that, but that at that time, that's when I like really took a deep dive. And NDEs just fascinated me. And Jeff Mara's podcast, I mean, I got so sucked in and like in the best way. I love his podcast. I love his questions. I mean, just his way of thinking it's beautiful. And something usually like if I'm feeling led or guided or just have an internal knowing. It's during the day. You know what I mean? I'm very rarely sleeping and being woken up. And this one night I was sleeping and just it was 3 a.m. out of nowhere, like shot up out of bed and just had this knowing that I needed to turn on the TV. And all I was watching at that time was documentaries and YouTube. And when I turn on the TV, Michelle Carpenter, who's in The Beings,
Yeah.
was on Jeff Maher's podcast.
Wow.
And I just knew I needed to reach out to her. I emailed her right away, and I've been working with her ever since then. And I bring this up. I'm focusing on kind of these weird internal knowings because I want to talk to you about your whistleblower project. Something that I can't really, well, I can explain it now, but for a long time, there were just particular moments where, just like with COVID, I just had this knowing that there was more to the story. And one example was when Princess Diana had passed away. And I'm an 11-year-old in America, but the situation just didn't feel right. It didn't settle right at all. And there's been various times that that's happened, but in particular, when that happened again was 9/11. And at that time I was 15. And everyone remembers where they were and what they were doing when they first found out and moments throughout the day. But this day was so, well, I grew up in Maryland, so we weren't far from it. And I mean, one of my good friends from high school, his aunt was a flight attendant and she passed. And um one of my best friends, her father was flying that day, and they were calling, students' names over the loudspeaker throughout the day. And I remember being in class, they showed it on the TV, and I walked out into the hallway when class had ended, and I felt like I was living in slow motion. I just remember like students walking past me, and it truly felt like slow motion, and they're talking about World War III. And I just remember thinking like, it was the same feeling I had with Princess Diana. And I just remember feeling like this isn't right. Something weird is happening. And again, same thing with COVID. Now that I've done the research that I've done, I'm understanding all of that much better. But I would love to hear you just talk about that project in particular. I mean, everything, the assassinations, just all of it. It all makes so much sense to me. So if you could talk about like just where the inspiration for that came from and all of that.
Well, it's interesting. A few things I'll track back to that you said. 3 o'clock is the witching hour for me. I always wake up at 3 in the morning. Don't ask me why. I always sit up. That's where the name for my show Hypnotta came from.
Mm,
Got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I said Hypnotta. I just said the word out
wow.
loud in my bed, and I'm like, did I say that? Did I bring that from? Did someone give me that word? Because I had never heard it before. Don't ask me why, but I said Hypnotta. So yeah, that and it sounds like you're like truly an empath, and an empath, and a lot of us are very like, to me, I mean, the sadness of whether it's Diana or this one or that one is part of the sadness of the collective.
Yes.
You know how horrible it would be if your own sister or brother died,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
So why shouldn't you think it horrible of somebody that you don't even know?
mhm.
And a lot of people just don't feel that. They're like, well, whatever, not my business. And a lot of people have that answer of, I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. Yeah, I get it. I get that you don't care because it's not you. I get it. But if it's you, then you're going to be like, why doesn't everyone else care? So
Mhm,
like,
mhm. Exactly. Yes.
and we're,
Yes.
and we're classic hypocrites, human beings.
Yes.
We are such hypocrites.
Yes.
Well, let's and put me back on track if I missed this, because I know you want to talk about the whistleblowers, but I want to talk about Jeff
Mm,
Mara for a
nice.
second.
Yeah.
Jeff is a real gift, and he is somebody that helped me since COVID, since everyone went inward. Not to mention the number of great friends that I lost in 4 or 5 years. Lost. We do not speak again. I'm talking about people I knew for 18, 20 years.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Done.
Mm-hmm.
Done. Because there's no place to go with anymore. And it was over the vax. I said it's bullshit. I said they've brought this on for other reasons. It has nothing to do with what you think it has to do with. And my friend was on the exact opposite. You're crazy. You're going to kill people. You're irresponsible. Blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, I never did this.
Mm-hmm.
I kept my sister, who has HIV, actually, I kept her off of it. She's never done it. Doctor scared the daylights out of her, saying you're going to be dead in no time, especially with AIDS. She called me up. She goes, Doug, I'm in the office. Should I take it or not? I said, Doretta, do what you want. I wouldn't do it. She never did it. Everything fine. My son, Brian, wonderful kid. I have a great, great son who's him and his wife are having twins at the end of the year, by the way, this year,
Oh, congrats.
and that went and spread out, and so many good people never took it, never went near it, and was never what it just wasn't what I was what they were saying. And
Yeah.
I'm still watching these commercials. I'm still seeing these pharmaceuticals pushing the crap out of this. Get your boosters. And you and I know the statistics now of what's going on out there. It's a nightmare, but we have a dishonest media. We have a media that will not give the real story.
Right.
They're politically charged and weaponized, and you're never gonna, and now to other people, this will sound like conspiracy theory stuff.
I wish that word didn't exist. Truly.
It's a word that I laugh at because, I mean, every now and then I'll tell somebody, wait a minute, you mean like during ancient Rome, no, there was no conspiracy?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, Nero didn't say to so-and-so, I think they're conspiring to them. And,
Right.
so there's no such thing as a conspiracy. There's no such thing as two or more people plotting a plan to take down another. But most people who don't know that term conspiracy theory came up through our intelligence agencies during the Kennedy assassination to quell the questioning. Oh, they're conspiracy theorists. And so the luxury of the person who just wanted to believe the official story was, well, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist.
Yep.
And that's how they took the knees out from it under everybody, and it worked. It worked.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how good
it's working very well. Yeah. I mean, people, it's interesting because they'll just label it conspiracy and just take in what they're hearing on the news without doing any other research or their own, you know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, the power of that word, it's
unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
And yeah, and if you get your own homework, you do your own homework, and I do my own homework, and we find the right people, the right media people that are going deep dive and putting their lives at risk and everything like that, they'll say, well, your sources are wrong.
Right.
They always have an out. They'll always have an out. But then they'll listen to MSNBC and CBS and whatever. Morning Joe says, gotta be. And it's so laughable to me.
Yeah, I agree.
World we live,
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, I saw the buildings fall on 9/11 right at the water's edge in Hoboken, my town. I saw the second plane hit. I got there after the first plane had gone in. Saw this wide open hole. It was one of the most beautiful days you could ever think of in September. And the wind was blowing south, and I was up north a little bit, and we were all just scratching our head like, what is this? How could that be an accident? And then I do remember, and this is, a lot of people don't want to hear what I have to say, but I remember all the way down to the right, I looked and I said to one of the guys there, I said, oh, look, a rescue plane is coming. I said, a surveillance plane is coming. Now, I said surveillance plane because it was not an airline. It was not a white, United Airlines or American Airlines plane. It wasn't. It was a grayish plane. I didn't know what it was, but I remember it going back, and I thought it's going to come around and like swoop around the whole building and come up. And I thought it was going, I wasn't sure if it's military, but all I knew was it was gray. And as best I can remember, it was kind of unmarked.
Hmm.
And then boom, I saw the explosion from this way. So the plane hit from behind. That was the second explosion. And then I remember, we hung around long enough to watch the first building fall and then watch the second building fall. And my friend Kevin died in the Trade Center, and and so we all lost somebody in this area, and that was I witnessed it. But I told on somebody's podcast recently, within the last 3 or 4 months, I was on someone's podcast, and they had an FBI guy who was out of the box FBI guy. He knew that it wasn't a legitimate story.
Hmm.
And I came on the air and I told him that, and he goes, "I'm so amazed that you're telling me this." He goes, "Because there aren't too many witnesses that have spoken about that it was a gray plane."
Wow. I haven't heard anyone say that. And I've done a lot of research on this.
And in fact, I saw a film recently of the plane coming around the back, and I freeze framed it, and
Yeah.
it's all gray. But everyone else says that's because there's no sunlight on it. But here's what doesn't make sense. If the building is here and the sunlight's here and the plane is here and the sunlight is here, the plane should be lit up too, but it
Yeah.
isn't. It's dark
Well,
gray. Stop me if I go too long. This is another thing I wanted to say about this whole idea of when we talk about false flags,
hmm.
conspiracy theories, and this and that. It doesn't mean we have the answers.
Right. Right.
It means this doesn't work for me.
Right.
This
What
does
we've been
not
told
work.
just isn't the answer. What
Right.
the actual answer is, we
Right.
don't know, but what they're telling us
Yeah.
is not the truth. Yes.
And I had an argument with a friend a long time ago that was one of the beginnings of the end of our friendship. And I just brought up an analogy to him. I said, listen, if your son took your car out and came home and you had a white car and you got it into an accident. And he said, Dad, I'm sorry. And you said, what happened to the car? And you said, a big red truck scratched the whole side of my car and took off, right?
Hmm.
And if you looked at the car and it was blue, not red, blue paint, it's an example of, I believe your story, but it doesn't add up.
Right.
I believe you had the accident,
Right.
but the story of the
Yes.
blue truck does not work with the
Yes.
red paint. How
Yes.
do you explain that? And so it's the same thing with the Kennedy assassination. I had a friend that challenged me on it. I said, he challenged me on Sandy Hook.
Mm.
Sandy Hook
This I
school.
don't know much about. So yeah, sorry, keep
I
going.
studied it inside out.
Mm.
And I'm not trying to say kids didn't die, but when I looked at the story and really studied it, and the arresting officers in the beginning of the story of Sandy Hook, the arresting officers in the first day lived in Hoboken. And I talked to one of them, and he
Interesting.
said, and he just went like this to me. He says, Doug, it doesn't work.
Mm.
So my friend who was arguing with me, he's like, yeah, but Doug, I know the kids died. I talked to the parents, the kid died. Well, JFK died in the assassination back in 63 too. That
Right.
doesn't mean the story adds up.
Correct. Exactly.
And this is something that I try to explain to people. They're like, oh, everything's a conspiracy to you. It's not. The story doesn't work. So whatever
Right.
if you could get the story to work for me, then
Exactly.
I'm on board with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
now
couldn't agree more.
we could jump over to the whistleblowers. So somewhere along the line in my art career, I'm painting surrealistic images inspired by Salvador Dalí. I went through a period of very detailed photorealism. I mean, so detailed. Like, Grant Cameron keeps saying, he goes, Doug, you got to stop posting photographs and calling them your artwork. I'm like, no, he's like, no, that's not. He says, that's not a painting. That's a photo.
They are
And
incredible.
yeah, when you go to my site and you see the Triumph TR6 headlight, I was really jacked into my work then. And then I broke it out into using realism as a way of creating surrealistic scenarios. There's a very, very famous artist named Chuck Close who's passed on now. that was one of the most famous artists in the world that I became friends with through my brother Greg. And we would go in and we see him, and he inspired me, and I changed my style, and I ended up doing that. But I've always had, as a painter, I've always had a love for realism, just real. Like, I'm not an abstract painter. I'm not like a leave it up in the air kind of painting. And
Right.
I was always like a realist painter, and I respected classical realists and John Singer Sargent and all the great painters, studied them deeply. I studied Russian realism and everything like that. And so I wanted to do a testament to, this is where it's important for me to tell you and your audience that while I do my art or my music or anything creative, it always has to be tagged to a mission, a purpose. It just not decorative, just not sellable. And I could have sold so much more work if I would have just let the narrative part of it go. But that's not me. I just always, and this harkens back to Twilight Zone and Rod Serling and all the great writers who wanted to change the way society looked at it themselves. Rod Serling was a serious writer that realized he couldn't get any of a serious social commentary written because people didn't want to hear it. So he masked, a lot of people don't know this. He then masked it in science fiction story. He had a great influence on my life as an artist. And I thought, Harry Chapin, the singer, also, great people. And I thought, I'm going to paint. I want to get away from this highly detailed, like taking 3 months to do a painting thing. And I want to do a painting a day. See if I can do a real quick, like general mock-up of an image of a face and do a painting a day, but do 100 of them. And I wanted to represent them, the whistleblowers, as one work, 100 portraits as one body of work. So if someone wants to buy 1 or 2 of them, you have to buy all 100. And I'm so stubborn that I've never sold it because nobody wants to buy it. But the day is coming when somebody is going to recognize the value of the collective work. And whether they recognize the value or not doesn't matter to me. I know what they mean. They were all great people that I painted, and all 100 portraits are on my website.
It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Do you know Graham McQueen?
Not a fan, no.
He was a Canadian. He just passed away like in the last year from cancer, but he was an anti-war activist, and he put out a documentary. It's probably the best one I've seen on 9/11. It's called Peace, War, and 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
it just breaks it down so beautifully. And I mean, his whole mission was to he was worried that he wasn't going to be able to complete it before passing, and he just got it done before he passed. I think you should take a look into it. I think you would absolutely.
What's the name of it?
Peace, War, and 9/11, and his name is Graham McQueen. I just love everything you're doing. I feel like it, especially now more than ever, I just think the best thing any of us could do is just start to look at things from a wider lens, from a different perspective, with a more open mind. I mean, there's just so much going on, and I just feel like we're just arguing over all these things that literally mean nothing at the end of the day. Not when you really take a deeper look into what's truly going on. I mean, our problems are so much bigger than a bill or an act or a policy. Again, we don't know exactly what all the answers are and how deep things can go and all of that, but I do know that what we think is our reality is far from it.
You know, on the conspiracy theory story, I had an argument with a hockey player friend, and because he introduced me at a gathering as, "Oh, this is Doug. He's a conspiracy theorist," and
I get labeled that
I
all the
wanted
time.
to whack him over the head with the hockey stick.
Yeah.
And I told him off kindly, but I told him off. I said, Pat, do you know anything about what a conspiracy theory is and where the term started.
Mm.
And he knew nothing about anything, but he's comfortable to tell me to put that tag on me with other people as if I got like some sort of black mark.
Right.
And now, for example, there's something called Operation Northwoods. I don't know if you ever heard of
Mm-mm.
Operation Northwoods. You
Mm-mm.
should take note and look that up.
Well,
But it's during the Kennedy years. Um, our Joint Chiefs and our Pentagon were trying to convince President John F. Kennedy of a way we could attack Cuba.
mm,
And they came up with Operation Northwoods. It was a secret plan to take our own airliners with our own college kids and shoot one out of the sky and blame it on Cuba.
yeah. Yeah.
It's documented and it's released, and and it's a real project that they were working on, and Kennedy said no. And it's not the only one. There's
Mm,
been many a thing where I guess our government and our agencies say, for the bigger picture, it would be better to let this happen. And then you go back to Pearl Harbor and all the talk about the fact that we allowed Pearl Harbor to happen, knowing that there'd be nothing else that could gin us into the war and get patriotism going, and now jump over to 9/11, same story.
mhm, mhm.
So all I'm trying to say is people talk and they go, oh, you're all about conspiracy theories. They're real.
Yeah.
Not all of them.
Right. And that also is a huge problem too, because the what's really going on, and then if you mix that in with the actual conspiracies that aren't
Yeah.
happening, it's like, you know what I mean? Like I do get why it's an issue, but I also don't understand how someone can just assume something or label someone something when they haven't done any of their own homework.
No, yeah, you're right. You know what I see going on, and it's probably always going on, but people are, and especially with inflation right now and everything, I cannot believe how expensive things are.
Yes.
I don't understand how the average person, I mean, I live by myself. I'm comfortable. I live in a studio apartment. I keep all my prices down, but the piece of salmon that I used to buy that was this big for $6 is $21 now.
Yes.
I don't understand how anyone can afford anything.
I
Yet
know.
we're complacent. I see people walking around. It's like they don't question anything.
Mm-mm.
I think what we're going through is people are struggling so hard to survive,
Mm-hmm.
make bills, that
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to dig time to dig into the things you and I dig
Read.
into.
Yes.
Therefore, they plop themselves in front of MSNBC and CNN at night, and they
Yes.
think now they've got the story.
Right.
I see this in doctors' offices. If I go down to my doctor's office, I see all the little people sitting around watching Morning Joe, and they think they've got the story. We better run out and get another 20 boosters.
Mm.
It's like we're brainwashed. We're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
brainwashed, and
Yeah.
and we're like smoked bees, when they smoke a beehive. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and they must, in my mind, they must provide for the aberrant numbers of people like you and I that actually look at stuff. They're like,
Yeah.
it's a small percentage, and
Yes. Yeah.
not going to be the issue. But the whistleblowers from John F. Kennedy to Rob Billitt, who blew the whistle on DuPont, to Enron, to UFOs, to medical, to Dr. Judy Wood, who wrote the book on 9/11 called Where Did the Towers Go?
Mm.
One person after another, I just came across them and I said, okay, I'm going to paint her. Okay, I'm going to paint him. And I just did them. And I said, at 100, I'll say that that's a series of work. And people today have been saying, Doug, there are thousands of them. I even passed up
Probably more.
thousands, way
Yeah.
more. But
Yeah.
my statement, my series made a statement, presents all of them, even though
Yes.
there's only 100 of them.
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
John Lear and this one, and then I missed a lot of people that I know that are friends that I missed, and Peter Robbins, who wrote a book on Rendlesham Forest, the UFO sighting there, and but then that's what got me now to go next to Hypnotta. Do you want to talk about my show?
I do, absolutely.
I want to talk about some other things first.
Um, no, I think we're good. Well, I mean, and the only thing that I was going to say is that if you were going to include everyone, every whistleblower in that project, you would be painting, I believe, until the
I
day
would.
you're
Yeah,
gone. Truly.
yeah.
I think that this is so much deeper than we realize. I mean, it's food, it's like truly it's everywhere. It's not just politics, it's not, I mean, I think a lot of
Oh,
people think that, and I mean all this stuff in Hollywood and it with elites and music. It's
oh my God.
that's just, I feel like we're just seeing the tip of the
Yep.
iceberg. And
It,
so yeah, it makes total sense that you did 100 and stuck to that. But yeah, I mean, when I look at to your point and your mission and why you did, like when I look at that project and look at the work, I don't just see the 100 people that are there. I mean, I think
yeah.
of all of them and I feel them. And so congrats on completing that mission very well. I mean, it's stunning. It truly is. I love everything about it. The actual work and the meaning behind it. Um, I believe that that line is going to be seen in a museum or a school or something. I mean, and hopefully these museums and schools look very different later down the road than
Yeah.
they do now. But yeah, I truly I'm putting that out there in the world because I think I do. I think that that line, that project is gonna go somewhere someday for sure. But
Thank you.
yes, I would
You know,
yeah.
included in that, and we said his name and we jumped right over it. People like Jeff Mara. I mean,
Right.
Jeff Mara is
Yeah.
so important. I see. I jumped to too many topics because my mind's on
How
many
can
things.
we not? There's a lot to talk about.
But, but Jeff Mara's show saved me from very deep depression. I was ready to go. I was like, all right, I don't have like any, I've got nothing in the tank anymore. I have no motive. I see no point to making art. I see no point to making music. I see no point to doing anything. And I got on Jeff Mara somehow. When I got on to Jeff Mara, he was mainly showing NDEs.
Mhm.
And I thought that's all he ever did. But now, every now and then, on once a month, Jeff Mara has me and four or five other people in his like month review private talk with him. We get
Awesome.
on and we
I've
just
seen
talk.
him do a private talk, but it was only with one other person, and this was a while ago. So I will absolutely jump back on there and
We
check
should
that
jump
out.
back on when he
Yeah.
does that. I don't know if it's only with his gold or silver members, or I don't know. But
Okay.
anyway, but
Either way.
Jeff, yeah, I mean, it saved me because I started
Mm.
to, it was a major deflecting point. It grew from the UFOs. I left ufology. I don't never really leave it, but I left
Right.
it behind. And now I'm a big NDE guy. I'm the person that brings my sister the NDEs, my brother. I would bring my son Brian. Brian, you got to see this. You're not going to believe it. And I would tell my sister Doretta, and I think I've helped my sister Doretta quite a bit by sending Jeff Mara
Yes.
NDEs and saying, Doretta, we don't die. This is not the end
Yes.
of it.
Yes.
And so it's such important work that those guys are doing.
Yes.
Um,
Not only is it healing, but
yeah.
I mean, it will change your paradigm.
Yeah.
You know, like it changes everything. Everything.
And the people that say like it's because you have to watch a lot of them. You see, people will say, "Oh, it's just the brain making like chemicals, and they're doing this." And I'm like, "Give me a break. All right,
Right,
hold on."
right. When there's too many people
Yeah,
experience, and they're
all
all
in the same
different,
room.
but they're
Yep.
so similar. There's too much consistency. I mean, yeah, yeah,
I mean, your brain is going to make you leave your body and float in the hospital room above the room and do
yeah.
this and do that. With hundreds of people doing the same
Correct.
thing, this, that. Yeah, there's variations of them, but I've always explained it as like, let's say you live in a little town and there's a huge mountain. There's nobody's ever climbed over the mountain and gone back.
Mhm.
There's myth and there's story about what's going to be on the other side. But
Yes.
all of a sudden, one or two come back over and start telling you the story. And if four or five or eight or 10 have
Yes.
gone over and come back and they tell you the same story, now
Yes.
it's not myth. Now
Yes.
you know what it is.
Yes.
And so I've always looked at it like that, but
Yeah. And that's exactly how I look at all of these quote unquote conspiracies. I mean, like to me, when, I mean, again, going back, and I'm talking about Hollywood and music because it's on like the forefront right now, but like to me, when they just started talking about Epstein and you see a photo of Clinton in a blue dress hanging on his wall when you walk into the
yeah.
house, like to me, the writing is literally on the wall. Now, if you're just looking at that one, I can see how you can dismiss it. But when there's just too many commonalities with too many people, good, whether it's a great story that's beautiful, that's from God, or if it's something really dark that we're seeing play out here on Earth. I mean, there's just too much consistency and overlap. Again, I think you bring up a phenomenal point that you can't just look at any one
No.
thing. There's a lot of topics to look into, and even within each of those topics, you do have to look at more than one. Yeah.
Well, I studied, one of the things that I've been afforded to do while working at home, whether it's painting or music, is I keep like the news or something on in the background. I always loved when I
Mhm.
would be painting, I'd have the news on in the background and everything like that. And I studied very deeply the Pizzagate story, the
Mm,
whole Pizzagate story. I studied it. I saved emails. I've got stuff on my computer. I've got stuff that, I'm sorry, does not add up.
yeah.
Don't tell me somebody is going to say, okay, Bill, I'll see you later. I'm going to do pizza for an hour.
Right, right. Yeah. The
Don't
email
tell me,
alone say,
don't tell me that
yeah,
that's how people talk. Don't
yeah,
tell me I'm going to do pizza for an hour with sauce.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's code.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Code. Give me a
And
break.
whatever, whether that like and all we see is like the owner of that building like talking. And again, like maybe it's got nothing to do with that building, but if you look at the email, like something's not right there. Something like, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Again, we don't
doesn't
know
work.
the answers, but something's not right.
There was a letter. I saw an email from one of the people involved in the thing, a woman. She said, everyone come over to the house, bring your trunks. We are going to be going in the water at a certain hour. And she said, and she named three children. She said, so,
Mm,
so and so and so and so will be there. And she goes, and I will tell you right now, they will be in that pool. That's
mm,
it. They will be in that pool. So here's a whole bunch of adults coming over, and she's making it clear that those three underage kids will
yeah,
be in the pool. Why?
right.
Why you need to
Yeah,
say this?
yeah,
Why do you need to set
yeah,
this up?
yeah, yeah.
So
I'm right there with you. Yes.
I mean, it's
Not right.
there's and so I have a smattering of so many things that I've studied from the Boston bombing, this and that, and then I got to know Jim Fetzer. Jim Fetzer is one of my topics that I painted in my whistleblower series. Jim is amazingly educated guy that's been doing this, that's been for so long. He looks into everything and he goes, it either works or it doesn't. And
Mm-hmm.
he looks into it and he's blown the whistle on so many things. But of course, they've destroyed his career. So
Mm-hmm.
of course he could never come on like he was, but he could never come on a regular news channel because he doesn't parrot the narrative.
Yep.
So he's marginalized with so many other great people that are marginalized and they're
Yes.
not allowed on.
Yep.
And those are the people that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm right
So,
there with you. So yeah, I definitely want you to talk about Hypnotta. I think it's beautiful. You even reference like how you don't want lasers and all of that. I heard you bring up Lion King before. I mean, there's just certain things about your story. Like I saw Lion King in New York after my grandmother passed. She handed down some money to my aunt and my mom, and my aunt and my mom ended up taking me and my cousin to New York on like this extravagant trip. It was at that time it was a big deal to us. I've traveled all over, so now I laugh at it. But at that time, like going to New York was a huge deal. And Lion King, I cried through the whole thing. It was just so beautifully done. And I just believe that we need more art and music and just stage presence in that way more than ever now. I think we truly just We need more of that. And I love where you're going. So please, yeah, if you could finish us off with the work
Yeah.
that you're moving towards.
And I will. And I'd also like you to mention, or at least your audience know about my Burn Survivor series, which was a major
Yes.
part
Yes.
of my entire career. I got a 2-page spread in the New York Times with,
Yes.
I was also the first artist to ever show a burn survivor portrait at the Smithsonian at
Mm,
the National Portrait Gallery. So that was a little bit of art history. And
yeah.
again, I never did any of this expecting any of that. I just
Mm,
make what I want to make. But
yes. And just so you know, it's funny because when I went to your website, once I knew I was going to have you on, the photo right behind you, or the painting right behind you, it does look like a photo. I recognized it right away. And I couldn't believe that I was, that you were who you were. I was just putting the pieces together because I had seen your work in the past and just did
Yeah.
not know, did not realize. And yeah, yeah, it's an honor to have you here. Your work is
Oh, you're very kind. I mean, I didn't realize who I was either. So I talked to my son Brian about this a lot. I'm like, you have no idea that when this work is done, I don't know who the person is who did that. Like,
Mm,
I don't know how I did that. I really don't know. It's like some supercharged ability to focus was there that's not there anymore.
mm,
And then sometimes I'm like, I don't really, talent is a weird thing to think about. And I'm not making this up. I don't really feel I'm that talented. When I'm determined and I get into a problem solving mode. And problem solving is mostly key to me, whether it's making a painting or music or this and that. It's like I'm going to start to problem solve. It's just a mode of thinking and analyzing things. But you talked about Hypnotta and Lion King. So Hypnotta is a story that came to me through the inspiration of the UFO world and through several key sightings, one being the aerial school sighting in Zimbabwe of the 63 school children. That
mhm.
was a major influence. I said, there's no way you're getting 63 kids to lie about something.
Right.
They're all on the same page. They're like, nope, we saw it, we saw it, we saw it. They drew pictures, everything like that. All right.
Mm,
Chris Bledsoe, who I became friends with, his event made a very big impression on me. And again, I didn't say that I'm going to prove without a shadow of a doubt. I wasn't there.
right.
I wasn't in Zimbabwe.
Right.
And my friend Nancy Tremaine, who with her friend Cindy, Nancy's a lovely person. I never met her in person, but we're like brother and sister.
Mm,
Told me her story, and she wrote 2 books about her entire event in a little town outside of Detroit, Novi, Michigan, I think it is. And she wrote 2 books on it, and she stuck to her story all her life about a UFO up in the trees. And it took her and her sister and her friend Cindy, and then returned her later on, and this that. And so when I came up with my idea called Hypnotta, from the word that I said in the middle of the night, okay, it came to me to take all my skills, my music writing, my art, everything, put it all together, and now here's your big final push offering to the world. And I'm going to write a musical. I'm going to write. I have no business doing this because I don't know how to do one, and I don't know how to do any of this, but I'm going to do it. And so I'm just going to take my songs. The style of music that I was writing anyway is very much classically oriented or movie music. Whenever I would write a song, people would be like, "Oh, that sounds like a show or like a movie."
mm,
Movie. So that wasn't too hard a jump for me to go from that. I started to write the story. I based on my 2 main characters are Nectar and Jilly. Nectar, my main character, and Jilly, and I based them on my friend Nancy Tremaine's real story of
mm,
Nancy and Cindy. And I patterned them after that. And I patterned my main character, Nectar, after having Native American blood in her lineage, to tie in the blue and red Kachinas and the lore of um, you know, Native Americans and the cave drawings and everything like that. I want to bring that forward and include it all. But one of the things I promised myself was, all right, there's too much. Every special effects movie, every sci-fi or UFO thing has such deep special effects in it
Mm,
that in a way a kid today looks at a Geico commercial and the special effects are more intense than they were 20 years ago.
yeah.
Like, so everyone is sort of saturated.
Yes.
And if you watch, and like the other day, with Robert Redford, Jeremiah Johnson came on a movie made in the 70s about like becoming a mountain man, and
Mm-hmm.
that is absolutely one of the most spectacular films anyone could ever watch.
Mm.
It explains it all, no special effects, great story, great storytelling. Then I'll go over to It's a Wonderful Life, around the Jimmy Stewart's movie,
Yes.
around the holidays. And
Yes.
it's like, oh my God, what a fabulous, gives me chills to think
Mm-hmm.
about how fabulous that film is. And I took the inspiration of that and I said, that's how I want Hypnotta to be portrayed on the stage.
I
I want
love it. That's one of my favorite movies too.
costume, yeah,
Oh,
costume, and like, lower like a silver cardboard thing down for the UFO, and like
I
have
love
little people behind it that act it out, and like have the story be told without special effects.
yes.
And that's what the story is about. It's about three main UFO sightings, but there's a twist in it. There's an out of body experience in it. There's a tragic death in it. There's so many aspects of everything that I've ever studied in this show, but the end is triumphant and joyous, just like the end of It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, I love it. I can't wait to see this. I really can't. I'm dragging my mom. That's for sure.
Hopefully you're going to be your mom's age before it comes out, because I cannot get a producer. I had a producer interested for a while, but I don't know if it's the timing or the way the industry works, but people just don't want to take a chance on it. They don't want to look at it. And I had a producer, and like I said, he was interested, but then he says something to me. He goes, "Yeah, but Doug, I really don't like believe in UFOs." And I had a great answer for him, by the way. I had the greatest answer for him. I said, "Did you like It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart?" He goes, "Well, it's a classic. I love it." I said, "Did you need to believe in angels?"
Right.
And he went, "Oh, you're right." It's like, you
Yeah.
go with the story. You go with the
Yes.
story. It's like some people will believe in it, some people won't, but it's the story and how it's told that matters.
Yes.
Anyway, 19 original songs. It's on my website. On my DougAuld.com website, you'll see the little tag that says Hypnotta link. And then you can go and you can look at it, and you could listen to some of the music and
Hmm.
read a little bit about the synopsis about the play. And I'm just kind of waiting and hoping that sooner or later somebody out in the media or entertainment
Yes.
world will pick up on it and maybe want to take a chance on it.
I truly believe that it's we're just I think especially right now in the next few months and just the
Yeah,
election it's we're just in a really weird. I mean,
yeah,
life is weird in general, but right now in particular I just feel like there's I think a lot of people are kind of waiting to kind of see whatever it is they're waiting to see, just how certain things pan out or whatever. I mean, but I do believe that um more and more disclosure will come out. And I don't just mean like with Hollywood and politics and elites. I mean, just across the board, I think um there will be disclosure. However that comes about, whether it's people doing their research or, you know, the public being and finally being formally informed on certain things or whatever. But I do think that that's gonna change. I mean, I will make myself a producer if I need to.
yeah. Well, I mean,
It needs
listen,
to be seen for sure.
I would love, it would be great to have a smaller town or small producer, a school or
Yeah.
something put it on. I'd love to have it in a 100-seat theater and this and that, but
How
we'll
cool.
take,
Yeah.
we'll see what the heavens have in mind
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think disclosure is going to come through experiencers.
Yes. Agreed.
I think you're probably very well aware of this with Jeff Morris show that ufology and near-death experiences are
Yes.
crossing over right now.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So I think it's the experiencers that are the value.
Yes.
I think the government is always going to be playing a game, and I kind of understand the government's game
Right.
because I think a lot of this is used just to control the masses, and you're going to
Absolutely.
possibly uproot religion. The Brookings Institute did a study years and years ago on this, and they came with the advisement to the government of do not let this out. Do not let this out. It will destabilize people. People need to believe and this and that and everything else. So, but I don't know. We'll see where it goes. It is changing because
It
the
is.
one good thing that we have now, and it always used to frustrate me, is every time a newscaster would have a UFO story, it would be ha ha ha, snicker,
Yes.
snicker, snicker,
Yes.
laugh, laugh, laugh. Well, Mark, so they were like, what? And they laughed back and forth. Now you
Absolutely.
actually get a serious, like a person with a straight face will tell
Yes.
the story.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree.
So
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
good.
Yes. Yeah. I do think things are changing for sure. And you hit the nail on the head. It's the experiences that I think are really going to change our way of thinking and viewing things. I mean, the beings is such a perfect
Yeah, the being.
example of that. It's unique perspectives from all these different points of view. And you know what I mean? They're real stories with real everyday people. And it's exactly that's going to get people to just see things differently. And it's got everything to do with why I started this podcast and why I'm talking to so many different people with such diverse backgrounds and stories, because I mean, the more we can get that out, I think the better. And I love your story. I love what you're doing. I love how your mind works. You stress about, being pragmatic but also curious. And I mean, the name of my podcast is Level-Headed Wild Child. Like your balance of the two extremes really resonates with me. And I think if yeah, if we can just get people to just even just not even like necessarily look for like exact answers. I think there's a good chance we won't get a lot of them. If any of them, but it's like just being in a place of curiosity and wonder. I think if we could just get back to that more and more, I think it would just make such a difference. I really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're like so focused on PhDs and MFAs and all these letters and all
Yes.
this and memorization and blah blah blah. And I had a brilliant woman tell me once, scientist, she's got the doctorate and this and that and everything else, right? She's educated through the roof. And she told me something I always repeat. She said, Doug, you have no idea how fortunate you have been to be denied an education.
I love that. Yeah.
You are
Interesting.
fortunate because you're unbridled,
Mm-hmm.
you're out of the box. You don't
Mm-hmm.
have to be that smart. I don't claim to have an IQ or this or that, but it's that so many really intelligent people won't even give the possibility
Yeah.
of a reality happening because, well, come on, I don't see it in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. And it's not in like the da, 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 and I read all the journals and it's not,
Yep.
and yet they can't change a tire, these people.
Right. Right.
And I'm
Right.
not knocking them. They're brilliant, brilliant people in the world, but that's not the whole picture.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a whole intuitive,
Mm-hmm.
empathic, you know, thing
Yes. Yeah.
that
There's a whole body,
yeah,
that we can use in various different ways that can give us intelligence and knowings. And yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Any
well,
final words? I feel like you just left us in a great place, but if there's any final words that you have, feel free to share.
I guess the only final words I would have is that I really have been struggling with focus now, and
Mm,
that I think the times that we're living in, there's such hectic energy right now that it's permeating. Like when I look back at Hypnotta or the whistleblower, I don't know how I did that work because
mm,
I don't remember how I could concentrate like that. And
mm.
my son and I just got several paintings back from a collector who is now, her husband is ill, and
Mm.
they helped me so much. They bought like 4 or 5 major works from me many years ago. And Brian and I both bought them back. We bought these paintings back from them. They need money now.
Wow.
And my son said, Dad, I love my children to have your art in the house.
Oh,
Someday you won't be here. And it was such a good move when we put the money together and we got them back. And we
wow.
were looking at the paintings. I did a portrait of Salvador Dali. These are all my websites, by the way, my website. I did a portrait of Salvador Dali, like this huge portrait of insects crawling around on leaves, flying and this and that, and a bee coming this way, and a butterfly doing this, and a grasshopper on a stick. Everything synchronized just right to make this portrait of Salvador Dali looking over his shoulder at the grasshopper, which he was very, very frightened of as a kid, as grasshoppers.
Mm,
And not many people would know that from the painting.
hear that.
But I was looking at the detail of this painting and I said, I simply don't know how I did it. I
Mm,
don't I don't know who that was. And
yeah.
so I guess my takeaway from this is I have a Substack that I'm starting to write that says that the title of it is called Towards a New Renaissance. I'm looking for
Mm,
us to make a new renaissance.
yes.
And that would be my takeaway, is that I'm really looking to be part of, whether I can contribute in any way, other artists and people that are not necessarily shoot into the right connections.
Yes.
All the crap we're hearing right now about P. Diddy and everything, it's through
Yeah.
the roof.
Yeah.
We got to get back to real human beings
Yes.
communicating with each other. And so that would
Yes.
be my takeaway.
I love it. I love it. Truly, I could talk to you all day long. I love everything about what you're doing. I really do. I will absolutely have the links to the book and your website in the description. Anything else that you want me to add in there, I'll put in there as well. But I can't thank you enough for this. This was truly an honor.
Well, it was an honor for me. And by the way, I thank Elle and I thank Amira for inviting me into the book, The Beings, which I have a copy of here. And I still haven't gotten to reading everybody's stuff. I'm just like preoccupied with a lot of things, but it was nice of them to invite me in, which brought me to being on your show.
Yes, I am so grateful for them. And yeah, they're going to change lives. That book is going to change lives. I
I
know
hope
it.
so.
It
Yeah.
already has. It already has.
Hopefully hopefully the Black Hawk helicopter does not revisit me, but
Let me know if it does.